Powers is better.
That's better.
That's better.
More powers and all power and young power.
Anyway, Kate Mulcahy is my name. So I'm from the village of Camp, which is situated on the north side of the Dingle Peninsula, 10 miles west of Tralee and 20 miles east of Dingle. We're approximately 25 miles from Scartaglin. So my music journey started in the late 1960s. My mother was from the South Connemara village of Cashel, County Galway, which is actually the same village where John Carty's mother, Bridie, came from. Yeah, so they would have known each other going to school and would have attended the same school in Cashel. And in fact, John's uncle, Paddy, would have played at my parents' wedding in Connemara in August 1957, along with Paddy Malloy, the fiddle player, who I believe emigrated to UK later. I had the pleasure of meeting Paddy at my sister's wedding in Kilburn, September 1998. Indeed, John Carty was in attendance and played on that occasion too. So my grandmother was Delia Canavan, she's from Kilcairn, or Kilkieron, near Carna, Connemara. She was a native Irish speaker. So communication with my Galway grandparents would have been sparse enough those times. We didn't have a car, they didn't have a car. My grandmother would visit once a year, letters every few months, and of course the parcel at Christmas. So we all have happy memories of happy holidays in Connemara as well. So I clearly remember my grandmother, Delia, asking my mother one time, had she ever heard of Julia Clifford and her brother Dennis Murphy, and were they living anywhere near us? And she had heard them on the radio on a programme which I believe was called Ceol and Saturn. I've tried to look up that programme since, but I didn't come up with anything, but it was there, I remember. So she thought their music was the sweetest she had ever heard. So my mother had that programme on every Saturday after that, and the radio was turned up should Julia and Dennis come on. So at that time we didn't have a record player, so radio was our only access for music, etc. Programmes like Mulcahy and Job at Journey Work in Kerry House were listened to with excitement. I understood why my grandmother was so enthralled with Julia and Dennis. So I attended the local school in Camp where our teacher, Padraig Murphy, introduced us to the tin whistle. We played on a Clark tin whistle. He taught us the scale and in a tonic solfa system, and we learned marches, right? The songs that we learned at school, he'd have taught us them on the tin whistle as well. So when I was in 4th class, he introduced a music teacher from Tralee called Tony Bunce. I believe it might have been part of a vocational education scheme at the time. And we learned from a booklet written by Micheál O'Doin or Mickey Dunn. And these little booklets, there were 2 booklets. One was Shine Sus Perth, which means play up a tune. And the second book was Shine Sus Portella. And so
Katie did it again.
yeah. So when I was 11 and in 5th class, we were told fiddle lessons would be available to us. So my parents bought me a fiddle from Cable's music shop in Tralee. It was April 1970. So we waited excitedly for the arrival of our new music teacher. It was none other than Nicky McAuliffe. I remember the moment he placed the fiddle in my hand. So I also remember going home to practice, taking out my fiddle, and of course I had to fiddle around with the pegs, and I broke my first string. I was mortified and I was in dread going back to class the following week. Needless to say, Nicky changed the string without recrimination. So in July 1970 our school closed. I was in 5th class at the time and had to complete 6th class in a neighbouring school. Therefore my lessons with Nicky came to an abrupt end. It was at this time as well that Quotas Kilterrier branch was formed in the parish. A man called John Paul O'Brien, his wife Eileen, asked my mother would she be secretary of the branch. I'd heard of 2 fiddle players in that area, one called Stanley Doyle, and his from Baldacurty on the Scoil, and Sean Keane from Conduff on the Scoil. So I was lucky enough to meet these 2 lovely gentlemen. So when I went to secondary school in Tralee, my mother sent me for further lessons to the aforementioned Mickey Dunn, who taught in the Tralee Vocational School at Motherwell after school hours. He did his best to teach me staff notation, but when I went home I transposed the whole lot to tonic sulfa, and I don't think he was impressed. He did his best. But I think maybe at this time as well that my mother started a branch of Cortes in Camp. I remember there was a gentleman from Tralee called Bill Cregan, originally from Tipperary, and he was a member of the Garda Síochána, I remember. He was chairman of the branch. And as children we participated in Scartaglin competitions with other rural communities. I believe Mointon and Tira were involved in these events, and they'd hold little drama competitions, you know, between the villages or communities. I think Mointon and Tira was a precursor for what are now called the community councils. So it was while rehearsing for these events that I met Stanley Dye for the first time. I loved his flamboyant style and his happy approach to the music. He seemed to be perpetually smiling. I remember hearing him play the hornpipe, the rover through the bog. So we'll play it soon, I hope. He played the Merry Blacksmith Reel and My Love Is in America. And just to add, at this time as well, I was very lucky to meet Sean DeHora, a Shannon singer from Ballyferter, and Sean O'Sullivan, a fiddle player from Dunqueen, who I believe is called Shawneen Vickle O'Sullivan. And he came from he was one of the last people to come from the Basket Islands. He spoke very little English, so it was lovely to hear him speak, but he enjoyed communicating in Irish. I think they may have come to one rehearsal and then came out for the competition. I think the competition might have been held in Kilgotnet in mid-Kerry. I can't remember if we placed in the competition, but I do remember the excitement. So all these events happened around 1971-72. So I remember my first visit to Scartaglin Féileachól. It was August 1971. I remember travelling with John Paul O'Brien and Stanley Doyle and my father. It was laughter all the way, and more laughter on the way home because Stanley won the Pádraig O'Keeffe Perpetual Cup. I believe Matt Cranach would have won this cup too, before or after, I don't know. I think it was the following year that I myself participated both in tin whistle and fiddle competitions, 11 to 14 age group. I believe Seamus Connolly and Donald O'Connor were adjudicating. I'm sure I placed, there were so few of us there that time that, you know, it was 1, 2, 3 or 3, 2, whatever. I didn't care. And it was this time that I met a girl called Kathleen O'Keeffe. She was from Ballynahulla, Ballydesmond. I think she may be a year older than me. So I was enthralled by her playing. I recognised that she had that same flowing rhythm that I had heard from Julian, Dennis and indeed Nicky. I remember thinking at the time that if I was from this area I would be able to play like her. That's my excuse. It was a style I felt that could not be copied. And I loved meeting her and listening to her flacos after that. And her mom and dad became great friends with my parents. It was a happy time. The Féile in Scartaglin was a happy place. Swings and merry-go-rounds, chips and ice cream. When I was writing this verse, I'm just looking at it there now, around Scartaglin was a happy place, swings and roundabouts. Merry-go-rounds will do. So I remember Matt Cranach playing, and I can't remember if he was judging or competing, but I thought he was marvellous. So I also have to acknowledge 2 musicians from the Castle Gregory area who influenced me greatly. They were Patton Hellard and his brother Michael Hellard. Patton was the grandfather of my cousins, the Mulcahys from Acoshla. So Patton played accordion and fiddle. He played waltzes and quick steps on the accordion, and he had a few polkas and a few jigs. I remember learning the low down jig that I believe we played last night here. I learned that from him. So he played regularly in Ashes Bar Camp in around 1974-75. I used to look forward to these sessions. He played in Daly's Bar Camp for a number of years after, with my brother years later. So Patton's son Willie Hellard is a well-known accordion player, as well as Patton's grandson Frankie. In 1974 we participated in the junior Kelly Band competition in Scartaglin. PJ has a picture of us all lining up, black and white. And another player I admired from our village was Jack Doyle. He was brother to Stanley Doyle. I loved listening to him, and he was a character as well. I loved his music and his company. There was also a man called Martin Griffin from Derrymore that we used to play with. So 1977 I moved to Dublin to work with the civil service, so while I had a great life experience there, I didn't get to play much music. So I returned to camp to work with ESB in 1979. I was very lucky to meet musicians such as Kieran and Colette Dalton, Kevin Ryan, Rory Costello, Dee Sullivan, Paul de Grey, and the Quality Brothers, Sean and Beta, arrived in town. A few years after that, Con Moynihan. We had Michelle Sullivan, Maura O'Keefe. I hope I'm not missing anyone, I can't see. I remember the album I bought, Jackie Daly and Seamus Cray record, I bought that in 1980. And my interest in music was kind of just got better and better after that. I just fell in love with all those tunes, especially Connie Connell's jig and Killiney Keeve. I think that first jig was composed by Michael Dwyer, brother
It
from
was,
Bar.
it was.
It's a lovely tune.
I got it from Connie, that's why I call it Connie.
That's all right. Yeah. Anyway, so I am happy to be here today. I remember my first World Fiddle Day here more than 10 years ago. My friend Nora, who's here, rolled into Scartaglin, and we're coming here ever since. The Handed Down series we look forward to every winter. My thanks to PJ and his team. Thanks especially for the invite to launch this wonderful event. We'll have a great day. Thank you.